In our exploration of sentiment analysis, we looked at a compilation of nursery rhymes from England compiled in 1886 by J.O. Halliwell Phillips. We believe that we could anticipate sentiments in the nursery rhymes well because their target audience is young children. Typically, when children are involved, the sentiments are mostly positive, revolving around joy and trust, due to their naive and impressionable nature. However, from personal experience, we also expected to see some nursery rhymes with more dark lyrics that could give us negative sentiments.
Here we are presenting a graph that shows the general trend of the sentiment in the book. We have the value of the sentiment for each line on the y-axis, and each line is a point on the x-axis. For this analysis, we used the affine lexicon, in which the words are assigned values from -5, which is the most negative, to +5, which is the most positive. And you can see that the sentiment gradually drops, and then it picks up a little bit, and then it drops significantly, reaching the minimum, and then it picks up again a little bit. And what we did in our analysis was to identify in which line numbers each chapter starts, and so once we did that, we could then see which chapters are more positive, which ones are more negative, and then we were trying to explain why we see the peaks and the drops in sentiment. For example, we had a chapter that was about love and matrimony, and that we identified corresponds to the peak, whereas a chapter titled Accumulative Stories corresponded to the drop. In this graph, we are looking at the sentiments in each chapter, or I should say chosen chapters. So we chose chapters 12, 14, 16, and 18 because they corresponded to the peak and the drop. And each of these graphs looks at how the sentiment in that chapter evolves. What was interesting is that this analysis allowed us to further identify points of interest or irregularities in the book and within each chapter. So for example, for chapter 14, which is about love, you can see that in the top right corner, the sentiment is mostly positive, but in the end, there are 3 or 4 bars that are, it's a group of negative sentiments. So we went on to look at that part, and we realized that this part contains a footnote that was inserted in the text. And this footnote contains some negative words, and in particular it was describing a plague situation in 1666 and how people got infected and they died. So because of the words that this footnote contained, in particular the word died, infection, plague, fatal, so these words we concluded were responsible for the group of negative sentiment, which is an irregularity in the love chapter.
We also used Voyant tools to look at the specifically negative words and see how often they occurred in the book. You can see that these words, which all scored a -4 or -5 in the affine lexicon, were used throughout the book and at a high amount. However, none of these words have a truly negative meaning. As you can see, one of these words, which was rated a -5, actually refers to a common animal. This rating should be more like a -1 or a 1, as it's actually quite neutral. These false negatives in the text could have influenced the overall sentiment of the book, making it appear much more negative than it actually is. When using the affine lexicon for sentiment analysis of older texts, we need to be aware that over time, words often change the meaning. A possible solution to this may be to allow users to take the publication date into consideration when using sentiment analysis, possibly referencing a different lexicon of words if it's written before a certain date. For working with text in the future, we'd like to know more about the text cleaning process, such as getting rid of footnotes automatically. We would also like to try a method that takes context into account. In addition to this, a logical next step for this project would be to look at some psychological or social research, specifically if there are any negative effects of these dark themes in nursery rhymes.